few moments ago, the Senate just completed the first chapter, but a significant chapter, in resolving the 2010-11 budget. As a result of today's action, and if the Assembly concurs, which I believe they will, and with the governor's signature, we will have taken about a $4 billion dent out of the deficit. Now, we know that the overall number remains large, but I put it into perspective, the following perspective. We are going to get some significant federal resources, whether it's $3 or $4 billion, we don't yet know. There are some encouraging signs about the economy. Over $1 billion gain in January over the anticipated revenue. And if you extrapolate that, we would hope and expect that we would be able to whittle this deficit down to $10 billion or less by the time the budget negotiations begin in earnest. And that's still a lot of money, and it's still a great challenge. But remember, we've dealt cumulatively, dating back actually to September of 2008, with over $70 billion worth of deficit, and just 60 last year. And so we did that, and we'll successfully complete this work as well, but this is a down payment. And it's a down payment accomplished without cutting education, without cutting higher education, without and with providing actually over time more resources for infrastructure and transportation. So it's a good solid start, and we'll look forward to going from there. In addition, I want to say, as part of this special session, the 27 bill package that represents the Senate Democrats' strong effort to stimulate the economy and create jobs is off to a very fast start. We have, I believe, 8 bills now over in the Assembly, 2 that are on the Assembly floor, bills that are common sense measures to begin creating jobs sooner rather than later. For example, the permit streamlining bill, which allows upwards of half dozen or more projects which need their permitting by the end of 2010 in order to qualify for federal funds. That bill now has passed the Senate and is over in the Assembly. Fran Pavley's bill to give a financial incentive for homeowners to put solar on their roofs, and small businesses put solar on their roofs. Big job creator. The tax conformity bill, which gives actually a tax break to people in the unfortunate situation of having to short sell their homes, to no longer have to pay taxes on the proceeds or the money that they save as a result of the short sale. And so we have made a dent in the deficit, and we're also going to continue to be very aggressive about job creation. Next month, we move into what I hope will be this month and next month. I hope we will transition into a couple of new areas as well. Namely, we want to take the whole issue of tax reform very seriously. We think the Parsky report as a whole, in totality, is flawed, but there are pieces of it that we can begin to work with. In addition to, I know Speaker Perez mentioned yesterday at the Sacramento Bee that the Assembly is very interested in taking on the issue of constitutional reform, especially in light of the fact that Repair California, and it appears, I hope it's not true, that California Forward is not going to be able to move forward with signature gathering. We intend to take up some version of these measures ourselves and to be on our floors with a reform package sometime in the month of April. Be glad to answer your questions.
Could you react to Race to the Top funds and how California didn't make the first cut? And what would that mean for education funding in this upcoming budget?
Well, I'm disappointed because I thought we put together a very competitive application, and we also need the money. But having said that, while the money is important, I've never negated or denied that. I think it is a rallying cry for us to continue working on the right strategies to turn around high poverty, low performing schools. And I'll tell you the issue that just climbs out for me, and that is the issue of how teachers are distributed throughout districts and throughout the state of California. And I've heard that the feds are going to comment on that, and as you know, last week the ACLU filed a major lawsuit against the LA Unified School District on the disproportionate impact of layoff policy on low-performing schools. I think that's something we need to take on legislatively. Because when the stark statistic that if you are a child that goes to school in a high-poverty area, it is more likely than not that a quarter or more of the teachers are going to be without credentials or substitutes. That's something that has to change. And between that and making the next round of between teacher distribution and elevating the issue of career technical education to the forefront and making that commitment in a very serious way, I think we'll be that much more competitive. But regardless, it's not just about chasing a federal dollar. We need the money, but it's not just about chasing a federal dollar. It's about doing what we ought to be doing anyways, and that is focusing intensely on the link between K-12 education, the job market, and the future economy.
On the topic of education, can
Yeah.
you talk a little more about the Prop 98 impact?
Yeah.
Education is held harmless, but that $800 million has to come from somewhere.
Well, we made a $4 billion dent in the deficit, and we still have obviously a lot of work to do. But as I said, we believe we can chip away at that by recognizing we've already been successful on the federal fund side, an improved economy, and if we can get that number down to $10 billion or less, then we can have, I think, a more manageable debate in the spring and the summer about how to address that deficit. But I'll tell you how we ought not to address it. We ought not to be cutting education or higher education anymore. We've done enough damage over the last year or two and beyond as a result of this one hand tied behind our back budget process where you have a 2/3 vote requirement that really leaves you little option but to look at how to spread the pain. Well, there may be some more pain, but education, I think, has taken more than its fair share.
But do you think that's a prospect, given that you didn't get $700 million?
Well, I'm not going to make any, I don't sign pledges. I do not sign pledges because we have a responsibility to govern. And in the end, if the deficit remains, if it's $10 billion, $9 billion, $8 billion, we have more work to do, and we'll do it.
Senator, you said during the gas tax debate that it's time to come to the middle.
Yes.
You all cut a lot of the more left things out of the proposal, and still the Republicans didn't go for it. I'm wondering your thoughts on that and the prospects for the summer. And, like you said, 2/3 for a budget, and
my thoughts were exactly as I spoke them on the floor. The position of the minority party on this set of measures surprised me because this really was a centrist proposal. It invests $655 million more in transportation infrastructure. That's apple pie. That's a job creator. It's one of the few things that Democrats and Republicans have consistently agreed upon. And instead, they take an ideological tack that says now is the time for a tax cut. Well, first of all, you don't even know that the cut will benefit consumers because the oil industry will likely just take it and jack up the price another nickel. So that's one important point. But we want to take that nickel and we want to use it to create 10,000 jobs and improve California's streets and roads. and to help public transit, of course, as well. So it's a difference, and I wanted to point out the difference because while, while they, in an election year especially, attempt to paint the majority party as too far to one side, I think that vote today, frankly, by the other side was a bit out of the mainstream. I mean, this is, and that's why I urge them to come to the middle. What does it portend for the summer? I don't know. We're going to get the job done, but we're going to fight hard for our priorities as well. Just because there's a 2/3 rule in this state doesn't mean that we're going to play off of their playbook. We're going to fight for the investments that are necessary to improve our economy and create some opportunity.
Can you address the constitutionality of switching the gas from the excise tax to the sales tax and diesel? I mean, is there a constitutional issue?
There is not a constitutional issue, and in fact, I think if you listen to Senator Hollingsworth carefully, I'm not sure he was suggesting that there was a constitutional issue in this case. What they're worried about is that the majority party would do that in some other form that would result in an increase in revenue. And we did that, if you remember, December, a year ago, when we had a $42 billion deficit. And we did seek to use a mechanism that would actually bring more money into the state's general fund. That's not what this is intended to do. This is dollar for dollar, excise tax for sales tax. You can use the excise tax to pay off general obligation debt, and that's in fact what we're doing, but it's not the same thing. So again, if you're going to take your cue from the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, and that's what's going to govern over these next difficult months, then that's one choice. But we prefer to tread down the middle, and that's and we'll continue to do so. Sort of the motto this year is no drama. We just want to do our jobs. We're passing our. We have an economic development set of proposals. We're moving our bills. We're dealing with the budget deficit. We want to do it with as little drama as possible. I think that's what people want and expect.
Has the governor agreed to sign his package?
No, but he hasn't. He hasn't. I do expect him to. I mean, the governor, I think has been a very strong advocate for both public education and transportation. And this proposal increases our investment in transportation infrastructure and doesn't cut another $800 million in public education. Now, again, we will finish the job and do what we have to do come June, July. Hopefully there'll be some continued good news about the economy, but now's not the time to cut investment in two of our most important economic development strategies we have: transportation, infrastructure, and education.
For the students outside
Yeah.
of UC campus, what can they expect through this budget process as you move through the summer?
Well, one of the things I've told the students, I had a group of UC students sit in on Monday, and I invited them into my office, and we had a really constructive conversation. One of the things I've said to them is that while it is our job, not your job, students, our job to figure out how to balance the choices, you need to become familiar with the choices so that you can add to your advocacy in a more successful way. Because it's one thing to say, don't cut, but it's another thing to say, this is how we suggest you go about not cutting. For example, they ought to get to know something about the oil severance tax. They need to get to know something about the 3% withholding on independent contractors. They ought to get to know something about the billions of dollars of tax breaks that sit in our code now without there being much proof in some instances that those breaks are actually creating jobs. Because, and the second thing I've said to them is make sure your advocacy is ongoing and consistent, because the rally day is great, but it's a start, not an end. And think about the power of these young people, if they were to match their don't cut education with a specific rallying cry or proposal around one of the tax breaks or an oil severance tax or a tobacco tax, that would then become a very different kind of conversation.
Senator, you mentioned that you hope to have the budget down to about $10 billion by the time negotiations come around.
Or less.
This is $4 billion. There's about a $6 billion difference. You mentioned some federal funds. I'm hoping you can talk about where those, the federal and then also
Sure.
the other two might come from.
Sure. The Obama administration has proposed, and the Congress appears to support, an extension of the FMAP, which is the higher Medi-Cal rate for California. That's a couple $2 billion. They also announced a week or two ago that they were supportive of about an $800 million clawback provision around, isn't that around Medicaid, right? Third, we are still fighting to rectify this accounting error where a number of Californians were put on Medi-Cal instead of Medicare, where there's no state match. That's another $700 million. So we think we can get between $3 and $4 billion worth of federal funds. And then, and this is the hopeful part, but if you look at that revenue piece in January, and you get to, and you look at the $1.2 billion above projections, not that that is going to continue at the same pace necessarily, February, March, April, but if we got a $3 billion boost out of the economy, 3 plus 4 is 7, plus the 4 we just did is 11, and then you're down to 9 or 10.
Will you be able to close out special session even with just this 4, even though the current year deficit is more around 6? And do you need the special session requirement?
We, our plan, I'm going to talk to the speaker about this. We'd like to keep the special session open at least another couple of days because we want to finish the work on our jobs bills. That, as I said, a number of them, I believe 8 of them, are over in the assembly, and we'd like to see the work completed on as much of that as possible and sent to the governor. In terms of the current year deficit, I've said this before, the one big difference between this year and last year at this time is that our cash situation is better than it was last year. And so we are in better shape than we were last year. And the governor has every right and ability to call any other special session on budget. We already have an existing special session open, 6 on tax and tax reform. And like I say, we're open to getting right into that as soon as this is done. We know the work isn't done. It's just beginning, but this is a very good down payment.